I walked into the cafe that afternoon, the familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. I'd been there countless times before, usually with Emma by my side, chatting about our day or planning our weekend. Today, I was alone, looking to grab a quick cup of coffee before heading back to the office. As I approached the counter, something, or rather, someone, caught my eye. There, tucked away in a cozy corner, was Emma. At first, a smile crept across my face. I thought she was surprising me with an impromptu lunch date. But then I noticed she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a young man, someone I didn't recognize at first glance. I paused mid-step, the friendly greeting I had been about to offer stuck in my throat. The man with her was tall and slim, with tousled hair that looked like it had been styled by a casual hand. He had an aura about him, something youthful and carefree, a stark contrast to the buttoned-up, structured world that Emma and I shared. His fingers played absently with a napkin on the table. And as Emma leaned in, laughing at something he said, I noticed the way her hand lightly brushed his across the table. It wasn't the touch of old friends reminiscing, it was something more intimate. The air seemed to grow thicker around me, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My first instinct was to march over there, demand an explanation, and make a scene if I had to. But I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were rooted to the ground. Instead of storming over, I found myself stepping back, slipping behind a nearby pillar where I could watch without being seen. I studied them carefully, the way a detective might observe suspects. Emma was completely engrossed in their conversation, her eyes sparkling with an energy I hadn't seen in months. She looked happy, almost glowing, as if this moment was one she had been waiting for. The man, no, the boy, leaned in closer, saying something that made her laugh again, a soft, melodic sound that once used to be mine to cherish. Jealousy twisted in my gut, sharp and painful. I had seen her laugh like that before, but it had been a long time since it was with me. I wanted to hate him, this young man who seemed to effortlessly draw out a side of Emma that had been dormant in our marriage. But more than that, I wanted to know who he was and what the hell he was doing with my wife. I continued to watch, every small gesture and glance between them driving another nail into the coffin of my trust. They were too close, too comfortable with each other. It wasn't just a casual meeting, it was something more, something deeper. I could see it in the way she leaned into him, in the way his eyes lingered on her when she looked away. As the minutes passed, my anger simmered just beneath the surface, but I forced myself to stay calm. A public confrontation wouldn't solve anything, and deep down, I wasn't ready for the truth that would surely come out if I did confront them. Instead, I decided to wait, to watch, and to figure out just how deep this betrayal ran. When their coffees were nearly finished, and the conversation seemed to be winding down, I slipped out of the cafe unnoticed, my mind racing with possibilities. I needed to know more, who he was, how long this had been going on, and what Emma was planning. I couldn't afford to act rashly, not without understanding everything. As I walked back to my car, a cold determination settled in my chest. Whatever this was, whatever Emma was doing, I would get to the bottom of it. I would find out everything. And then, when the time was right, I would decide how to handle it. For now, I had to keep my emotions in check, play the part of the unsuspecting husband, and prepare for what was to come. In the days that followed, I became a shadow. I was no longer just Kevin, the husband and architect with a predictable routine. I was a man on a mission, driven by a need to uncover the truth about Emma and the young man I now knew as Jason. His name had been easy enough to find out, a few discreet questions to mutual acquaintances. And soon I had a clearer picture of who this boy was. A talented violinist, just beginning to make a name for himself in the city's music circles. But that knowledge did little to quell the storm brewing inside me. I began to track their every move. It started with Emma's phone, something I had never even thought to do before. It felt like a violation, but the hurt and suspicion gnawing at me justified it, or so I told myself. I scrolled through her messages and her call logs, looking for signs of their relationship. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There were late-night texts, innocent on the surface but loaded with meaning. The tone was playful and flirtatious. She'd saved his number under a different name, but I knew it was him. Jason. My stomach churned with each new revelation, but I kept going. I began following her. The first time, it was after she left for what she told me was a yoga class. Instead of heading to the gym, she drove across town, her car eventually pulling into a small Secluded parking lot near the park. I parked a safe distance away, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched her get out and walk toward a grove of trees where Jason was waiting for her. They met with a familiarity that spoke of countless other meetings like this one. He pulled her into a quick embrace, his hands resting on her waist just a little too long, her face lighting up in a way that twisted my insides. I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, forcing myself to stay calm and rational. This was just the beginning. I needed to know more. Over the next week, I followed them to different places. A quaint little bookstore, where they browsed the aisles together, whispering and laughing softly. A hidden cafe on the outskirts of town, where they sat in a corner booth, heads close together as they shared secrets over coffee. The park, again and again, where they strolled hand in hand, oblivious to the world around them. Every time I saw them together, something inside me cracked a little more. The anger I felt was like a slow burning fire, growing hotter and more intense with each passing day. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung, though that was bad enough. It was the way she looked at him, with affection and tenderness that she no longer showed me. I had seen that look before, years ago, when we were younger and our marriage was still filled with the kind of passion and excitement that time had since eroded. Now, that passion was being redirected to Jason. And I was left in the cold, an outsider looking in on a life that was supposed to be mine. I hated them both for it, Emma for betraying our vows, and Jason for stealing her away from me. But more than anything, I hated the way this entire situation made me feel, powerless, humiliated, and increasingly desperate. I began to notice every little detail about their interactions, cataloging them in my mind like a detective gathering evidence. The way Emma would lean into him, her smile wide and genuine, as if nothing in the world could bother her when they were together. The way Jason's eyes would soften when he looked at her was filled with a mix of admiration and desire. The subtle touches, the shared glances, they all added up to something undeniable. Each encounter left me seething, my blood boiling with a mix of rage and sorrow. I could hardly sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of what they might be doing behind my back. Every time Emma came home, acting as if everything was normal, I had to fight the urge to confront her, to scream and demand answers. But I held back, knowing that I wasn't ready to tip my hand just yet. I needed to bide my time, gather more information, and figure out exactly what I was going to do. This was a game now, and I had to play it carefully. One wrong move and I could lose everything. But if I played it right, I wasn't sure what would happen then. All I knew was that the Kevin I used to be was slipping away, replaced by someone darker. Someone I didn't entirely recognize. As the days went on, the tension inside me grew unbearable. Watching them together was like pouring salt into an open wound, and every time I saw them, the pain became sharper, the resentment deeper. But no matter how much it hurt, I couldn't stop. I had to see this through to the end, no matter what that end might be. So I kept following, kept watching, each new observation feeding the fire inside me. I was no longer just a husband, I was a man driven by the need for retribution. And soon, I would be ready to act. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I decided to follow Emma once more. The leaves had started to change, painting the park in shades of amber and gold. It would have been a beautiful day under different circumstances, but all I felt was a cold dread in the pit of my stomach as I trailed behind her, keeping a safe distance. She had made plans to meet Jason again, and I needed to know what they were up to this time. The secrecy of their meetings had become almost unbearable. The lies stacking up like a tower waiting to collapse. I watched as she entered the park, her pace quickening as she approached the secluded grove where they often met. I stayed back, moving carefully, my steps silent on the carpet of fallen leaves. I knew the area well. It was a spot we used to visit together, a place of shared memories that now felt tainted by her betrayal. I found a vantage point behind a thick oak tree, close enough to hear but far enough to stay hidden. Jason was already there, waiting for her with that easy smile that had once seemed so harmless. He greeted her with a gentle kiss, and they sat down on a bench, their heads leaning in close. I could barely make out their words at first, the wind carrying their voices away. But then the breeze shifted, and suddenly, I could hear them as clearly as if I were sitting right next to them. "I've been thinking about us a lot," Jason was saying, his voice soft but steady. There was a seriousness in his tone that immediately put me on edge. About the future. About what we could be if things were different. Emma sighed, a sound filled with both longing and resignation. I know. I've been thinking about it too. I can't keep doing this, Jason. I can't keep living two lives. There was a pause, the kind of heavy silence that comes when someone is about to make a life-altering decision. My heart began to pound in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears so loudly I was afraid I might miss what she said next. I'm going to leave him, Emma finally whispered, her words slicing through the air like a knife. I can't stay with Kevin anymore. It's not fair to him, and it's not fair to us. We deserve to be happy. I felt the ground shift beneath me as if the entire world had suddenly tilted off its axis. She was going to leave me. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, was planning to walk away. And not just walk away, she was planning to start over with Jason, this boy who had somehow wormed his way into her heart and stolen her from me. Jason took her hand, squeezing it gently. Are you sure? This is a big step, Emma. Once you make it, there's no going back. I know, she replied, her voice firm. I've thought about it a lot. Kevin and we haven't been happy for a long time. We're just going through the motions now. It's not what I want anymore. It's not what I need. I wanted to shout, to burst out from my hiding place and confront them both. How dare she say that? How dare she reduce our years together to something so meaningless? But I stayed rooted to the spot. Unable to move, unable to do anything but listen as she continued to unravel our life together. I've already started looking at places, Emma said, her voice brightening slightly. There's a city a few hours away, quiet, with a great art scene. You could thrive there, Jason. We could build something new, something just for us. Jason smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, filled with hope and excitement for a future that, up until that moment, I hadn't even known was possible. That sounds perfect, Emma. It does. I just want to be with you, wherever that is. They kissed again, a tender, lingering kiss that made my stomach turn. I couldn't watch anymore, but I couldn't look away either. Every word they spoke was like a hammer driving a nail into the coffin of my marriage. I'll talk to Kevin soon, Emma said as they pulled apart. I don't want to drag this out any longer than it has to. He deserves to know the truth. The truth, that word echoed in my mind. Bitter and hollow. The truth was that she had already made up her mind. The truth was that I was about to lose everything I had ever cared about, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. As they stood up and began to walk away, hand in hand, I felt a cold, steely resolve settle over me. This was it, the last straw. I had been patient, I had watched, I had gathered all the evidence I needed. And now, I had reached my breaking point. Emma had made her choice, and soon enough, I would make mine. I stayed hidden until they were completely out of sight, the sound of their laughter fading into the distance. Then, with a heavy heart and a mind racing with dark thoughts, I turned and walked away, my footsteps echoing in the quiet of the park. Emma might think she had control over how this ended, but she was wrong. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. After that day in the park, everything became clear. The lies, the betrayal, the plan Emma had so carefully constructed, they were all out in the open now. Laid bare before me. And yet, as much as it hurt, as much as I wanted to rage and confront her, I knew that would be playing right into her hands. She expected me to crumble, to fall apart when she finally revealed her plans. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. No, I would do something she'd never see coming. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breathing, I formulated my plan. I thought about the yacht, the one that had been sitting in the marina for years now. Gathering dust and memories. We used to spend so much time on that boat, back when life was simpler, when our love was enough to keep us afloat. It was the perfect place, a symbol of our past, a setting for our future. And it would be the stage for my revenge. The next morning, I began to put my plan into action. I needed to play my part perfectly, to act as if everything was normal, as if I were completely oblivious to what she and Jason were plotting behind my back. At breakfast, I brought it up casually. As if the idea had just come to me. Emma, I said, my voice light and cheerful, I was thinking, it's been ages since we've taken the yacht out. What do you say we go on a little trip? Just the two of us, like old times. She looked up from her coffee, surprised. I could see the hesitation flicker across her face. No doubt she was thinking about her plans with Jason, wondering how this new development would fit into them. But I didn't give her time to dwell on it. I leaned forward, reaching across the table to take her hand, squeezing it gently, just like I used to when things were good between us. I know things have been a bit distant lately, I continued, allowing a hint of vulnerability to creep into my voice. But I want to fix that. I want us to reconnect, to remember why we fell in love in the first place. A weekend on the water, away from everything, it could be exactly what we need. She hesitated, biting her lip as she considered my offer. I could see the conflict in her eyes. The tug of war between her guilt and her desire to keep up the facade a little longer. And then, almost imperceptibly, she relaxed. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I had married, the woman I had once believed would always be by my side. That sounds nice, Kevin, she said softly. It does. Maybe it's exactly what we need. I smiled back, but inside, my heart was pounding. This was it, the first step in my plan. I knew Emma well enough to know that she wouldn't be able to resist a romantic getaway. And more importantly, she wouldn't be able to resist the idea of bringing Jason along. After all, in her mind, this trip would be a way to ease her guilt, to spend one last weekend with me before she left. She would see it as a chance to introduce Jason into our lives, under the guise of a casual, friendly gesture. And that's exactly what I was counting on. Over the next few days, I started making preparations. I visited the marina, checking on the yacht, and making sure everything was in working order. It had been a while since we'd used it, but with a little bit of maintenance, it would be ready for our trip. I stocked it with supplies, enough food and drink to last us a few days at sea. I even made a playlist, filled with the songs we used to listen to when we were younger, when life was still filled with dreams and possibilities. Everything had to be perfect, every detail meticulously planned. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, I brought up the idea of inviting Jason. You know, I said casually, since it's going to be a relaxing trip, maybe we could use a little music on board. What do you think about inviting that violinist you've been working with? Jason, right? I've heard you mention him a few times. It could be fun to have some live music. Emma's eyes widened in surprise, clearly not expecting this suggestion. She glanced at me, searching for any sign that I knew more than I was letting on, but I kept my expression neutral, even enthusiastic. I wanted her to believe that this was all my idea, that I was blissfully unaware of the true nature of their relationship. That's a great idea, Kevin, she finally said, a smile slowly spreading across her face. I think Jason would love to join us. He's been working so hard lately, a weekend on the water could be just what he needs to unwind. I nodded, feeling a surge of dark satisfaction. Everything was falling into place. She was playing right into my hands, exactly as I had hoped. With the plans finalized, I could feel the anticipation building inside me. But it wasn't the kind of anticipation that comes from looking forward to a relaxing getaway. It was something darker, more insidious. I wasn't just planning a trip, I was planning retribution. I was orchestrating the end of something that had already died, even if Emma didn't know it yet. As the day of our departure approached, I went through the motions of excitement, packing bags, double-checking the yacht, and making sure everything was ready. But beneath the surface, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I knew what I was about to do, and there was no turning back. Emma had made her choice, and soon, I would make mine. The stage was set. The actors were in place. All that was left was for the curtain to rise, and for the final act to begin. The days leading up to the trip were filled with a meticulous sense of purpose. I knew what needed to be done, and every moment was spent planning it down to the smallest detail. This wasn't just about getting on the yacht and sailing out into the open water. It was about setting the stage for the perfect accident, an event that would be believable to anyone who asked but would ensure that Jason would not return with us. I started by poring over nautical charts, studying the areas we would be sailing through. The coastline near where we were headed was dotted with small, isolated coves and rocky outcroppings, places where the water was deep and the currents strong. These were the kind of places where accidents could happen, where someone could slip overboard and be lost before anyone had time to react. I made mental notes of each location, planning the route in such a way that it would seem natural to stop there as if we were simply enjoying the scenery or anchoring for the night. The yacht itself became my next focus. It was an older model, but still sturdy and reliable, a vessel we had shared many good times on in the past. I spent hours going over every inch of it, making sure it was in top condition. I checked the engine, the navigation systems, and the safety equipment. Everything had to be perfect, right down to the life vests. I even tested the radio, ensuring it would be functional if needed, though I hoped I wouldn't have to use it. As I worked, I found myself thinking about how Jason might react when things started to go wrong. He was young, confident, perhaps even a little arrogant, a man who had likely never faced real danger in his life. Would he panic? Would he try to fight back if he realized what was happening? The thought sent a thrill of dark anticipation through me. I knew I had the upper hand. I knew this yacht, the sea, and every inch of our route better than he ever could. Out there, in the open water, he would be at my mercy. Then there was the matter of timing. The incident would need to happen when Emma was otherwise occupied, perhaps below deck, or asleep, or distracted in some other way. I needed her out of sight, out of mind, just long enough for me to carry out my plan without interference. I considered various scenarios, envisioning how each might play out. Maybe we would be enjoying a drink on deck as the sun set, the gentle rocking of the boat lulling everyone into a false sense of security. Or maybe we would be anchoring for the night, Jason leaning over the side to admire the view when a sudden lurch sent him overboard. I imagined the look on his face, the moment of realization that something was wrong. The flash of panic in his eyes, the desperate scramble to grab hold of something, anything, before the cold, dark water swallowed him up. And then the silence, the vast, indifferent silence of the sea, as if nothing had happened at all. To prepare for every possibility, I made sure to pack an extra length of rope, a small, heavy anchor that could be quickly attached to a lifeline. It would only take a moment to tie it to his leg, to let it slip over the side, dragging him down before he even had a chance to scream. It was a grim, calculated thought, but one that I couldn't push away. This was my plan, and I was going to see it through. As the departure day drew closer, I went over the plan again and again in my mind, rehearsing each step, each movement, each word I might say to cover my tracks. I knew Emma would be suspicious, and would ask questions if something seemed off, so I made sure everything would look and feel as natural as possible. I would be the doting husband, eager to spend quality time with his wife, enjoying a weekend getaway with a friend in tow. No one would suspect a thing. In the meantime, I continued to play the role of the loving husband at home. Emma had no idea what was going on inside my head. She went about her days, smiling, making small talk, even showing a glimmer of the affection that had long since faded between us. I played along, keeping up the facade, all the while counting down the hours until we would set sail. The night before our trip, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with the thoughts of what was to come. I knew this was the point of no return, the moment when my plan would shift from theory to reality. I had to be prepared for anything, and to expect the unexpected, but I also had to trust in the plan I had so carefully crafted. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I knew that the next time I lay down in this bed, things would be different. Jason would be gone, and Emma would have to face the consequences of the choices she had made. I would be the one who emerged from this ordeal, perhaps not unscathed, but in control, having exacted the revenge that had been festering inside me for so long. The morning of our departure arrived, bright and clear, the perfect day for sailing. I finished packing, loading the bags into the car, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything. When Emma came downstairs, she looked at me with a smile, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. "Ready for our adventure?" I asked, forcing a smile. She nodded, her eyes bright with anticipation. "I can't wait. It's been so long since we've done something like this." I leaned in and kissed her, my lips brushing against hers with a tenderness that surprised even me. "It's going to be a trip to remember," I whispered. And with that, we were off, heading to the marina where the yacht awaited us. The plan was in motion, the stage set, and as we drove, I couldn't help but feel a dark, twisted sense of satisfaction. This was it, the culmination of everything I had been working toward. Soon, very soon, Jason would be out of our lives for good. The sun was beginning its slow descent into the horizon as we set sail, casting a warm, golden glow over the water. The yacht glided smoothly through the calm waves, cutting a path through the deep blue. It was the perfect evening for a romantic getaway, the kind of night that would normally bring a sense of peace and contentment. But for me, there was no peace. Beneath the calm surface, a storm raged inside me, a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and anticipation for what was to come. I made sure everything was perfect. The deck was spotless, the table set with candles and a bottle of wine chilling in a bucket. I had planned every detail meticulously, down to the music that would play softly in the background as we sailed into the twilight. I wanted everything to seem normal, even idyllic, so that neither Emma nor Jason would suspect a thing. Emma, ever the gracious host, suggested that Jason play something for us on his violin. He agreed, of course, eager to showcase his talent. I could see the admiration in Emma's eyes as she watched him unpack his instrument, the same look she used to give me when we were first together. It stung, that look, but I forced myself to smile, pretending that everything was fine, that I was the devoted husband enjoying a lovely evening with his wife and a friend. Jason began to play, the sweet, haunting notes of his violin filling the air. It was a beautiful melody, one that might have moved me at another time, under different circumstances. But now, all I could feel was a simmering rage, a deep sense of betrayal that tainted every note. The music was like a knife, twisting in my gut, reminding me of everything I had lost. I kept up the charade, though. I sipped my wine, nodding along to the music, even complimenting Jason on his skill. Emma looked at me with a soft smile, as if she were proud of me for being so gracious, so understanding. If only she knew, but she didn't. She had no idea what was going through my mind, no idea that I was counting down the minutes until the moment I would finally take my revenge. As the music played on, the sun dipped below the horizon. The last rays of light casting long shadows across the deck. The stars began to emerge, one by one, twinkling in the darkening sky. It was the perfect night, the kind of night that people remember for years. And I intended for this night to be remembered, just not in the way Emma or Jason imagined. The moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. The music reached its crescendo, Jason's fingers dancing across the strings with effortless grace. Emma was entranced, her eyes half closed as she lost herself in the melody. It was then that I knew it was time. I rose from my seat, pretending to stretch, to enjoy the night air. I walked over to the edge of the deck, looking out at the endless expanse of ocean around us. "Jason," I called over my shoulder, keeping my voice light, "why don't you come over here? The view is incredible. You can see the stars so clearly out here." Jason hesitated for a moment, but Emma nudged him, encouraging him to go. "Go on," she said with a smile. "I'll be right here, listening." He nodded, still playing as he walked over to join me. The music grew softer, more intimate as he approached, the notes floating through the cool night air. He came to stand beside me, his eyes on the horizon, the violin still tucked under his chin. "It's beautiful out here," he said quietly, almost to himself. "So peaceful." I nodded, my gaze fixed on the dark water below. I could feel the tension building inside me, a coiled spring ready to snap. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "It is." And then, in one swift motion, I acted. I reached out, as if to steady myself against the railing, and then, with calculated precision, I gave Jason a sharp push. It was quick, almost too quick to comprehend. One moment he was there, the next, he was tumbling over the side, the violin slipping from his hands as he plunged into the water below. There was a splash, a startled cry, and then silence. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The sea, the stars, even the wind, it all seemed to pause. Holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Emma's scream shattered the stillness, a high-pitched sound of pure panic. She rushed to the edge, her hands gripping the railing as she looked down into the water, searching for any sign of Jason. "Jason," she screamed, her voice trembling with fear. "Jason, where are you?" I stayed where I was, watching the water churn below. I could see Jason struggling, his arms flailing as he tried to keep his head above the waves. But the current was strong, pulling him away from the yacht and dragging him further into the darkness. I knew he wouldn't last long. "I can't see him." Emma was crying now, her voice filled with desperation. "Kevin, do something. We have to help him." I turned to her, my face a mask of confusion and concern. "What happened?" I asked, my voice filled with feigned shock. "Did he fall?" "I didn't see." "Yes, he fell. He just slipped." Emma was frantic, her eyes wide with terror. "Kevin, please, we have to do something. Get the life preserver. Call for help, anything." I moved slowly, deliberately, as if in a daze. I reached for the life preserver, tossing it over the side, but I knew it was too late. The waves had already carried Jason too far, and he was too weak to reach it. I could see him in the distance, his head bobbing in and out of the water, the last remnants of his strength slipping away. Emma was beside herself, sobbing uncontrollably, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles were white. She kept calling his name, over and over, but there was no answer. Just the sound of the waves, the wind, and the faint echo of the music that had stopped playing. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her away from the edge, whispering soothing words even as I felt nothing but a cold, hollow emptiness inside. "It's going to be okay," I murmured, my voice calm and steady. "We'll find him. We'll get help." But deep down, I knew there would be no help, no rescue. Jason was gone, swallowed by the sea, just as I had planned. The accident had happened so quickly, so naturally, that no one would ever suspect the truth. Emma clung to me, her sobs racking her body, her tears soaking through my shirt. I held her close, my eyes fixed on the horizon where Jason had disappeared. The storm inside me had quieted, replaced by a numbness that I couldn't quite explain. I had done what I had set out to do, but instead of satisfaction, all I felt was a strange, unsettling emptiness. The night stretched on, the yacht drifting aimlessly on the open water. Emma eventually exhausted herself, collapsing into a heap of grief and exhaustion. I stayed by her side, my thoughts a tangled mess as the reality of what I had done began to sink in. Jason was gone, Emma was broken, and I was left with the consequences of my actions, with nothing but the cold, dark sea around me and the sound of silence in my ears. The journey back to shore was a stark contrast to the one we had set out on. The yacht cut through the early morning mist, the engine's low hum the only sound breaking the heavy silence that had settled over us. Emma sat huddled in a corner, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and streaked with tears. She hadn't said much since Jason's disappearance, her eyes vacant as if she was in a state of shock. I steered the boat with a sense of grim determination, feeling like I had achieved something significant, something that would finally set things right. But as we drew closer to the marina, that feeling began to shift, the triumph I had expected to feel giving way to something else, something far less satisfying. The dock came into view, the familiar sight of the shoreline doing nothing to ease the growing unease in my chest. I had thought this moment would bring closure, that returning without Jason would be the final victory, proof that I had regained control over my life. But as the yacht bumped gently against the dock, all I could feel was a creeping emptiness. Emma didn't move as I secured the boat and helped her onto the pier. Her hands were cold, her steps unsteady. I led her to the car, trying to offer comfort, but she pulled away, wrapping her arms tightly around herself as if trying to ward off some invisible chill. The drive home was eerily quiet. The radio played softly in the background, but neither of us spoke. Emma stared out the window, her expression blank, lost in thoughts I couldn't reach. I kept my eyes on the road, my mind racing with everything that had transpired. When we finally arrived home, Emma didn't wait for me. She got out of the car and walked inside. Her movements mechanical, like she was on autopilot. I followed, the house feeling strangely unfamiliar as I stepped inside. It was as if everything had shifted, the familiar comforts of home now tainted by the weight of what had happened. Emma went straight to the bedroom, closing the door behind her without a word. I was left standing in the living room, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I had thought that I would feel relief, that with Jason gone, things would return to normal. And that Emma and I could somehow rebuild what we had lost. But as I stood there, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Emma was broken, shattered by the loss of Jason, and I realized that she would never look at me the same way again. Even if she didn't suspect the truth, the guilt and the grief would hang over us, a dark cloud that would never fully dissipate. My plan had worked, Jason was gone, but the cost was far higher than I had anticipated. I had taken away the man she loved, but in doing so, I had also taken away any chance of us finding our way back to each other. The days that followed were a blur. Emma barely spoke to me, moving through the house like a ghost, her eyes hollow, her spirit crushed. I tried to reach out to her, to offer comfort, but she recoiled from my touch, her trust in me irrevocably damaged. The distance between us grew with each passing day, a chasm that I knew I would never be able to cross. At first, I told myself that it was just a matter of time before she would come around and that we could still salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But deep down, I knew the truth. Jason's death had changed everything. I had destroyed not only him but the last remnants of my relationship with Emma. There was no going back. I spent hours alone, replaying the events of that night over and over in my mind. I had wanted revenge, had craved it, and I had gotten exactly what I wanted. But instead of satisfaction, all I felt was a gnawing emptiness, a void that I couldn't fill. The house was silent, too silent, the absence of Emma's laughter. Her warmth, more painful than I had imagined. I thought about the moment I had pushed Jason overboard, the look of shock and fear on his face as he realized what was happening. At the time, it had felt like justice, like I was taking back what was mine. But now, that memory haunted me, the echoes of his final moments lingering in the corners of my mind, a constant reminder of what I had done. Emma barely looked at me anymore, her eyes avoiding mine whenever we were in the same room. It was as if she could sense the darkness in me, the anger and bitterness that had driven me to such a terrible act. And in that avoidance, I saw the finality of what I had lost. I had won the battle, but the war had left me alone, isolated, and utterly hollow. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. I had sought revenge, believing it would bring me closure, that it would heal the wounds of betrayal. But instead, it had opened new wounds, deeper and more painful than anything I had ever felt. I had lost not just Jason, but Emma too, the one person I had thought I was fighting for. Now, she was a stranger to me, her love for me dead and gone, buried beneath the weight of what I had done. In the end, I was left with nothing but the emptiness of my own making. The house was quiet, the silence oppressive, as I sat alone in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of my actions. The revenge I had so desperately sought had brought me nothing but ruin, and as the days dragged on, I realized that the real punishment was not the loss of Jason, but the loss of myself. The life I had known was over, and in its place was a desolate landscape of regret and loneliness. Emma was still there, physically at least, but the connection we had once shared was gone, replaced by a cold, impenetrable wall. I had no one to blame but myself, and as I stared into the darkness, I understood that this was my true sentence, to live with the knowledge of what I had done and the emptiness that it had left behind.